Connecting. Um, and then I definitely want to talk to you about the Puro stuff, which is crazy. We are connecting, and a lot of people are filing in. They're taking their seats virtually in the virtual room.
Can you actually tell when people are joining?
So there you go. It'll just
Great.
start popping up on the bottom. People are joining fast and furious is what happens. And I say hi to everyone. People let us know where you're from where. Look at I'm trying to make sure I have proper grammar. From where you are joining me and Liz today. I always want to know where everybody is. Hi, Sylvia Rivers. Hello to you. Cornelia, thanks for joining us. And let's see, upstate New York. I think I just saw Mike Fanone, one of my favorite people uh, ever is Mike Fanone, Madison, Wisconsin. My one of my best friends went to school at Madison, New York City. Look at this. Yes, people are filing in and joining us. I'm so grateful. Louisiana. I saw some Louisiana there. Look at this. I mean, Liz, people from all over the country. Curious to
Amazing.
know if anybody
So
is
cool.
from outside of our country. Um, yeah, hello, everybody. As you are filing in, as I like to say in our virtual room, and joining us, I am thrilled to be able to share time today with Liz Oyer. Many of you are familiar with Liz and her, I'd say it's her saga. But is it an exciting time? Liz has now officially launched on Substack today with her first
Wow.
post. So we want to welcome Liz to the Substack community. Looking forward to her contributions to the community that we are building together here. And Liz, if you want to take just a few minutes to tell who's tuning in right now, just to get them caught back up to speed, who you are and what you did until you are no longer doing your job courtesy of convicted felon Donald Trump.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Katie. I'm excited to join the Substack community, and I'm happy to talk a little bit about the journey that got me here. So, until March, I was working at the Department of Justice as the pardon attorney. The pardon attorney is a non political position that advises the president about granting clemency. On March the 7th, I was abruptly fired from my position. I received a very short memo from Todd Blanche, the Deputy Attorney General, who I had never actually met, telling me that I was fired effective immediately under Article 2 of the Constitution. And that was the end of my career at the Department of Justice.
Well, I have feelings about Todd Blanche and they go way back. But Liz, summarily terminated, unfairly terminated. I know that it's been frustrating, but what you've done is you've converted that experience, which was incredibly negative, into something positive, meaning you have decided to join the pro democracy movement, not like you weren't a part of it already, but in a very outspoken way by joining Substack, et cetera, and speaking to people in the media. So, my first kind of question I wanted to ask you is how much of a misconception do people have about pardons and commutations? Meaning, um, is a president required to take your advice when you are kind of running the office of pardons?
Yeah, this is a very misunderstood area of law, Katie, in part because there's not really any law around it. The Constitution gives the president total discretion to grant clemency to anybody he chooses for any reason. And clemency can come in different forms. It can come in the form of commutations, which are essentially a reduction of a sentence that's been imposed by a court, or it can take the form of a pardon, which is forgiveness for the crime of conviction. It wipes away the conviction and the sentence in its entirety. So different presidents have used this power differently. But what has been a constant up until now is there has always been a role for the Department of Justice's Office of the Pardon Attorney. It's a non political office. And the reason that it's there is to ensure that the clemency process does not become completely politicized or completely inaccessible to people who don't have political connections or access to lobbyists and lawyers.
And don't have the money. So, Liz, fill in our viewers. on the going rate these days to get a pardon from the Trump administration.
It's really shocking, Katie. There have been some stories that have talked about what's described as the pardon economy, a whole economy that has popped up around lobbying for pardons. And people are making seven figures to lobby for our pardons on behalf of their clients. Lawyers are getting paid $1 million or more if they're successful in getting pardons for their very, very wealthy clients.
So is that legal though, Liz? Because I know that's what a lot of people are asking. How
Yeah.
is that not tantamount to basically bribing to get a pardon?
Well, I don't know enough about what's going on in some of these individual transactions to know whether there is anything that has crossed the line legally. But pardons are a space where it's very unregulated because the Constitution gives the president this broad power. The Wall Street Journal actually wrote about this morning what they described as the wild, wild west of pardons under President Trump. It's really just gotten completely out of hand in a way that I am certain is not what the framers of the Constitution intended. But they did write in this very broad presidential power. And given how broadly it's written, it's hard to find those limits that can rein in things like what is going on now under President Trump.
So then, Liz, the follow-up question would be, we have seen what Donald Trump has used his pardon power to
Yeah.
do. And let me be clear, as you've said, it's a power that has been given to him constitutionally. So there is discretion that is afforded him to be able to decide what he wants to do with that power. However, I did mention a few minutes ago that we are joined in today's live by Mike Fanone, Officer Michael Fanone, formerly of DC Capitol Police, who was brutally attacked in his attempts to defend the United States Capitol on January 6th. And one of the most notorious pardons that we have seen were of the January 6th insurrectionists, some of whom got commutations, but majority of which
Yeah.
received pardons. Is there a way to gauge the intentionality behind using the pardon power in this way, like Donald Trump is doing?
Well, that's something that he talked about doing on the campaign trail. And it seems like his plan to do that was fully baked by the time he actually took office. So on January 20th, that was announced. It came as a shock to me, to my entire staff. We were not informed in advance that that was going to happen. And it created a lot of chaos within our office and beyond the way that was managed. But at the end of the day, that is something that the president has the constitutional power to do. I think the things that the president is currently doing with the clemency power are causing a lot of us to question, is this a good thing? Is this an unchecked power that the president really ought to have? I'm somebody who came to clemency with the vision that it could really be used to do a lot of good. My background prior to joining the Department of Justice is as a public defender. I spent 10 years defending people against federal criminal charges. And in that role, I really saw some of the stubborn injustices of our criminal justice system, the way that it can treat people very harshly. And I believed that clemency really had the power to do a lot of good. I had seen what President Obama had done with clemency. He really systematically used it to try to correct some of the racial disparities in our criminal justice system, to try to remedy some unjust sentences that had been imposed under mandatory minimum sentencing laws, many of which have now been repealed. He
Yes.
used it in a way that really was not political. It really was aimed to improve the quality of justice in our country. But that, is not the model that every president has followed. And it's certainly very, very far from what is happening now with the use of clemency power.
So, Liz, two critical points that I want to make clear to our viewers that are tuning in and that I'll be watching this later on. Number one, the pardoning of the January 6th insurrectionists occurred when you were the pardon attorney for the United States.
Yeah.
However, you were given zero notice, and more importantly, you were not consulted in any way prior to the announcement of those pardons. Isn't that right?
Yep. That's correct, Katie.
And I guess the next thing then would be, so your job when you were the pardon attorney, and we'll get to who's currently occupying that role in a second, but your job was to be able, to your point, take these applications for clemency and review them on a case by case basis to see who merited, and I'll use the word merit, even though, of course, that is kind of a subjective term, but who merited the consideration of obtaining, which is a gift is an understatement. Let's be very frank. A
Yeah.
pardon is a total reset button for so many people, a commutation, not having to serve a sentence, et cetera. I mean, these are things that could be life changing for someone who's been through the criminal
Yeah.
justice system. So the suggestion that not the suggestion, the reality that you weren't even consulted, for example, for the January 6th insurrectionists being pardoned, does that suggest that President Trump, or excuse me, Trump is using in any way any type of objective factors to be able to make these decisions at this time?
Whatever the criteria are that he may be using are a mystery to me. The Department of Justice has a detailed set of criteria that it applies when evaluating pardon and commutation applications and making recommendations to the president. They are long-standing guidelines that the department has applied for decades. They're all written down in a very lengthy document called the Justice Manual. And none of the criteria that the Justice Manual rely on are satisfied in the majority of the cases where this president has signed off on pardons and commutations. These are just not the types of cases in which the office of the pardon attorney would traditionally recommend clemency. And let me note that there are lots of really deserving people out there, but they're generally people who have served their time, paid their debt, and expressed remorse for their offense. For example, what we focused on when I was the pardon attorney was people who are incarcerated serving life sentences, for example. There's many people incarcerated across the country who are sentenced under mandatory minimums to life imprisonment. Some of those people have been locked up for 20 to 30 years and they have demonstrated exemplary rehabilitation during that time. There are people in prison who have letters from Bureau of Prison staff, corrections officers saying, this is somebody who's rehabilitated and they don't need to be here. Those are the types of people we would look at. Or there are people who have come home to their communities after being sentenced for a minor crime decades ago, and those people are still facing barriers to employment, housing, things like that because of a criminal conviction that is now decades old. Those are people who may have contributed in very significant ways to their community. Those are the types of people that we're recommending in the Office of the Pardon Attorney for pardons. We are not recommending billionaires who are seeking to get out from under hundreds of millions of dollars of debt through a pardon, which is the type of person that the president is now prioritizing in his review of clemencies. It's really just hard to wrap one's head around how some of these folks could be deserving of that extraordinary form of relief.
Like crypto bros and such that are
Yes,
buying their way
exactly.
out. So I want to bring up, and I'm checking the date on this because I want to make sure I was correct, because I think politics is making perverse bedfellows these days. One of the people that got pardoned on January 20th, 2021, Liz, is a man by the name of Albert J. Pirro, Pirro. And for you guys tuning in, if
Yes.
that last name sounds familiar, that is the husband of Janine Pirro, who has now been nominated to be the interim United States Attorney for the District of Columbia, a role that was previously held by a guy by the name of Ed Martin, who was a failed bid to become the permanent U.S. Attorney. Ed Martin not only was present at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, but he also is a big lie promoter, a election denier, among other things. And the wild thing, Liz, is Ed Martin, although he will no longer be vying for the role of United States Attorney of D.C., he now has your old job.
That's right. Yeah, it's really shocking, actually. My old position is one that has always been filled by a career person, someone who's not a political appointee. So that's new to have someone with that political background in this role. And what's also notable about it is that Ed Martin is in charge of another portfolio in the Justice Department called the Weaponization Working Group. He's the director of that project at the same time as he's the pardon attorney, which suggests that this administration sees a real tie between going after its enemies and pardoning its friends. Something along those lines seems to be the vision for that role. Martin is somebody whose views are so extreme that
Hmm.
Republican senators tanked his nomination for U.S. attorney. That's something that's been incredibly rare under President Trump, that his nominees aren't getting through the Senate. And he's somebody who just had such fringe affiliations that even the Republicans in the Senate were not going to support his nomination as U.S. attorney. So the Trump administration has put him into these roles that don't require Senate confirmation, and he's got a lot of power in those new roles. And it is very concerning to envision how he may use it.
And, Liz, I appreciate that nuanced point you just raised, which is allowing somebody like Ed Martin to live in the pardon attorney space where we both know he's going to be doing things unchecked in and of his own discretion, then obviously at the bidding of Donald Trump. But then to also have him heading up the weaponization kind of, mission of the Trump administration, those things actually run parallel to each other. They're things that are
Yeah.
kissing cousins. And so it just heightens the concern then that I have for the next kind of topic I wanted to talk to you about. You were an accomplished pardon attorney, accomplished federal public defender, accomplished litigator in the civil law space as well. You and I have had very similar trajectories. I not as accomplished as you, but one thing that you and I, as lawyers, have are professional responsibility and ethics that we have to continue to abide by. And the one thing that I have railed against for a number of years, but especially when I had my show, was the people I call the enablers. And those are specifically the lawyers that have been working on behalf of Donald Trump, either in the government sector or in the private sector. Todd Blanche, Emil Bove, Pam Bondi being critical examples, Ed Martin now being an example. I wanted to ask you, Liz, your thoughts about the failure. I know the American Bar Association has come forward, Liz, and has definitely taken a position on threats against the judiciary, et cetera. But I wanted to ask you your thoughts about these lawyers. Ooh, are you still there, Liz? I don't know. Did we lose
Sorry,
her?
I lost you for a moment, Katie. Can you hear
That's
me?
okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, yeah.
Ah, gotcha. I just don't see you, so I'm not quite sure if we're able to get you
Oh
back on or
no.
not. Let's see. Are you able to get back on? This is the gem of being on
Um,
live.
oh, hold on.
Let's see if we can get you back on so we could see you.
Still.
Now I can't hear her. The pic is good, actually. Liz's pic, her profile pic is good. The audio is clear. Thanks, Lucky. Oh, Lucky like my dog, Lucky. Yeah, Liz, we'll just keep going and maybe your photo will come back. You are getting a lot of compliments right now on your profile photo. So we're just going to move forward quickly with the audio because the audio is crystal clear. Liz, I wanted to get your take though on the enablers, as I call them, the idea that there are lawyers that have these ethical obligations to not promote frivolous theories, to not advance legal arguments in court and otherwise. We've seen those things happening right now, especially in the immigration space when it comes to litigation about the kidnappings that are occurring under the guise of deportations. We've seen these arguments being advanced in the Doge litigation, trying to justify the destruction of our federal system by Elon Musk and his tech bros. I mean, I'm frustrated because I don't know if there's enough being done by our own profession as lawyers to be able to check this type of conduct.
Well, Katie, I mean, I think that's exactly right. The problem is enablers inside the administration as well as outside. This is really a moment to be brave, but Trump has made everyone very afraid. He's made people afraid of retaliation. And one thing that we're seeing is that law firms, the defense bar, is capitulating to demands from the administration to do pro bono work on their behalf, not to take on certain cases that are contrary to the administration. So the checks and balances that we rely on, the safeguards that we rely on in our legal system to be able to prevent the excesses of government are being steamrolled by this administration. It's really a multi-pronged attack on the rule of law, and that is incredibly concerning. I think that this is a time that calls for all of us lawyers to be brave, to stand up for the rule of law that we have always taken for granted in our career. But it's a time when not everyone is choosing to do that. And one of the reasons that I'm speaking out is because I really hope that it will give others who may be thinking about it the courage to stand up for what they believe and what is right.
Yeah, and I'm actually going to check on social because I believe that I just saw Kyle Cheney, one of our greatest legal reporters, actually report that the a judge said that the Trump administration's withdrawal of funds to the American Bar Association actually was not legal. And so to that point, even the American Bar Association, when it tries to stand up for the rule of law, as we've seen it try to do, it's been targeted by this administration. But we've seen the rule of law stand, Liz, and that's an important point. I have always acknowledged I have empathy for the frustration that people have about watching the destruction of our democracy in real time and being frustrated when they see lawyers that are being non-compliant, that are making outrageous arguments in court, and people keep on asking, but why are they not immediately sanctioned? Why are they not immediately held in contempt? Why does it feel like they're able to get away with more than what others would be able to get away with?
Yeah, it's just a time when everything is happening differently than what we are used to, and holding people to account is important. It's something that the courts are really the last line of defense to do at this point, and we're really putting a lot of reliance in the courts to be that check against all of the things that the administration is piling on right now. One thing that's happening is things are just happening so fast that it's hard
Yeah.
to even take stock and keep up, and hard to understand what matters. And virtually everything that is happening matters. It deserves our close scrutiny, but it's just such a flood of information that it's hard to stay on top of all of it. And some of it is happening behind the scenes and even in secret. And the lack of transparency is an issue that creates further alarm. It's one of the things that I'm most worried about. For example, in the pardon space, we know about some really terrible, inappropriate uses of the pardon power from this president, but we don't know what we don't know. We don't know if there are other pardons that he has done in secret. There's not any requirement for some of these things to be done and subject to public scrutiny. So it's just very hard to know what we should be most worried about in this environment.
Oh, Liz, I can't let that statement go without the follow-up, which is, what are you talking about? Do you mean to tell me that there's a possibility that Trump has done pardons of people about whom we are not aware?
It's entirely possible, Katie. I mean, what I'm relying on to know which ones have been done is what's trickling into the public domain. But we're often learning about these things because they just come up in some other context. For example, lawyers sometimes have to make public filings on a court docket that provide evidence of a pardon in order to bring legal proceedings to an end. So we're learning about some of these pardons in that way, but the administration is not announcing them, and that is new. In the original Trump administration, Trump 1, these things were generally accompanied by a press release. The White House would issue a statement saying, "Here's who we're pardoning, here's why, here's who supports it." They are not doing that anymore, and there is no way for us to know whether we even know about all of the pardons that have been issued. And I think it's the same in many other domains. There's no way of knowing what deals is President Trump cutting in secret, what transactions are happening inside the Oval Office that are not being shared with the American people. So it's just, very concerning time all around.
So why was it so important then for you, Liz, to instead of just saying, you know what, I was terminated unfairly and this is terrible, and I'm just going to go quietly into that good night? Why are you deciding that you want to be on Substack, you want to continue to speak out, and you want to continue to educate? Because I am a huge fan of the phrase "knowledge is power." One of the key things I try to do on my Substack, on my show, is to educate people, because the more information you have and more accurately the truth, the more powerful you are to be able to affect change. So, why was it so important for you to do this?
Well, I'm not sure I would say, Katie, that it's really what I want to be doing in this moment. It's what I feel obligated to do. I feel
Yeah.
like I have an obligation to my fellow citizens to use the information that I have and the experience that I have been through to try to educate others, sound the alarm about some of the things that are happening, and try to use my own experience as an example of what is so horribly wrong with the current moment that we are in.
Well, Liz, I, on behalf of all Americans, am sad that you are no longer in the role of pardon attorney because, as you said, as a non political appointment, you brought dignity and respect and equity to a position that desperately needs it. We now have Ed Martin, and so I laud you for wanting to do this and to understanding that yes, there is an obligation to continue to educate and speak up about not only the pardon space, but why there is such a danger to the stuff that is transpiring behind the scenes. I want to tell everybody who's tuning in, follow, subscribe, and make sure you continue to be a part of Liz Oyer's Substack world. We are so grateful to have you here, Liz. And I'm looking forward to having continuing conversations with you about what you're up to. And I suspect that you are right, that there is a lot going on about which we don't know right now, and that it's definitely going to be in this part in space. So we'll definitely come back and have more conversations.
Thank you so much, Katie. I really appreciate your having me. I'm so sorry about the video. I'm going to try to get better at this before I see you again, and hopefully the video will
Not a
hold up next
problem.
time, but I really enjoyed the conversation, and thank you for having me on.
Yes, and Liz, when I tell you they love your profile pic, they love your profile pic. So you are in good stead. Don't worry about it.
Well,
I'll see you
I really
later.
appreciate that. Thanks so much,
Yeah.
Katie.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.